We decided to go to Nottingham mostly because of Robin Hood, right?
It's just so whimsical to go somewhere really known for myth.
So what we didn't know is there's actually a lot of other interesting stuff. There's a whole underground cave system because underneath Nottingham, there's very easily carved like sandstone. And so people would dig out their own basements basically.
They said there were like more than 5,000 caves that were made at some point.
Yeah, and they connect and they turn them into bunkers during World War II, during the bombings, the air raids. So it was all very interesting to see.
Called City of Caves,
City
which
of
also
Caves.
is just a fun name.
Yeah. And on our first weekend, we also went to the Justice Museum, where we were assigned convict numbers, and around the place it told us what our convicts did, and they had actors there giving performances, which we participated in. I had to accuse somebody. Obviously,
Yeah.
I accused Laura.
Sean got pulled in, and because he didn't want to call on a stranger, he called on me.
Is important. But the Justice Museum also had prison cells. They had prisoners there. There were public hangings there. It was all very interesting. It was like a central place in Nottingham. Then we went to Walleton Park.
A really nice park. It's big, and there were two museums there.
Yeah, there was the Walleton Manor, which just it was a house. It was a place that they rich people lived, obviously.
It's also where part of Batman was filmed.
Yeah,
And some other movies.
And then right next to that one was the Industrial Museum, which had a lot of engines, tractors, bicycles, because apparently the area was very known for their bicycles. They had a woodworking shop with all the old tools and an interesting guy there that took us through and showed us how to use a bunch of them. And
We walked along the water in the park. It's always just fun to walk along the water. It was a huge man-made pond, and
yeah, I mean, just in addition to the setting, there was a very nice nature setting. There used to be a train, but that wasn't running when we were there. Being in Nottingham, we had to do some of the very touristy things, like the Robin Hood experience.
we had to go to Sherwood Forest too.
It's unfortunately not nearly as big as it used to be, but there are over 900 ancient oaks, which are oaks older than 400 years.
There's one called the Major Oak, which may actually be from the time that the Robin Hood myth originally started.
Yeah, they estimate it's 900 to 1100 years old. Near Sherwood Forest is a little town which had St. Mary's Church, which is apparently where Robin Hood and Maid Marian were married. However, we know Maid Marian wasn't even introduced into the Robin Hood tales for like 400 years. We decided to do basically a really long walk day to Arboretum, which is the oldest public park in Nottingham. Then we went to the Attenborough Nature Reserve, obviously started by Sir David Attenborough back in 1966.
It's a beautiful park.
Very nice, lots of birds.
We saw some newts
Do like a good newt. Now we're walking back
along the canal.
along this nice canal, which will probably take us a couple hours. We're at about 31,000 steps so far for the day. A pretty outdoor day for us. On the second day of our holiday weekend, we decided to go to Lincoln for the day trip. And we came and we saw the cathedral, which you can see it's big up on a big hill called Steep Hill, which is very aptly named. And the castle is right next to the cathedral, so we did the castle as well, which had
one of the copies of the Magna Carta. There are 4 surviving original copies. I've seen 3 of them.
right. I think one isn't on display. There's 2 at the British Library, one of which got damaged in a fire. So I think only 3 of them are on display. And Lara has now checked all 3 off of her list, which was great. Then we did the Museum of Lincolnshire Life.
It was always really interesting to see like the history of what goes on in an actual area.
Yeah, and it was, basically about, they cover the war, they cover notable people from the area, businesses, things like that.
And now we're walking along the waterfront.
And now we're walking along the Brayford waterfront, just past the University of Lincoln. So it's been a really nice day. For day 3, we decided to go to Leicester on a day trip, the Richard III Visitor Center, where they found his bones in 2012.
The archaeology exhibit there was really cool.
They found 2 living descendants, got their DNA, compared them against each other. Then when they found some bones, based on a lot of research, they DNA tested and found that the DNA matched the DNA of the 2 living descendants. And so they confirmed that they indeed found Richard III's skeleton in a council car park.
After we fully explored this exhibit, we took an hour-and-a-half walk over to Kirby Muxloe Castle, which is an unfinished castle, but really cool.
Unfinished because William Hastings, Lord Hastings, who was building the castle, did not support Richard III becoming king.
And so obviously had to be executed.
And there were a lot of nesting geese.
Who got angry at you even if you were nowhere close?
You approached them at your own peril.
Today we took a bus trip over to Bolsover Castle and Dundee House. We had a bit of a mishap in the beginning because we decided we were going to try for the earlier bus than we had originally intended, and it just didn't stop.
Hey, just drove right past us. But anyway, we decided to just walk. Then we also decided to get off the bus. Instead of transferring, to just walk from a spot. Found a nice little trail called Stockley Trail all the way to Bolsover. Now we're headed back, but we found out there's actually a nature reserve right along this trail as well. So we decided to take a little trip there.
It's really pretty.
Yeah, it's very nice. The castle itself is not really a castle. It's a mid-1600s house, but there used to be a medieval fortress. Actually, it dated back to the 11th century, I think they said.
Yeah, but there were no remains of the medieval fortress, like a tiny, tiny bit of wall.
Yeah, in the 1600s, Charles Cavendish bought the property and tore everything down to try to rebuild it as a summer home, basically. Although it's massive by our standards, it was too small to live in full time, they thought.
So it was used for like parties,
Yeah.
and there was a whole stable area where dressage really
It was
took off.
apparently a menage, which was the predecessor of dressage. So basically, William Cavendish, Cavendish's son, who ended up finishing the project after Charles died, he was very into horses, and he actually made it an entire riding school. One of the longest running ones. They still do horse shows there in the summer, but it was still very interesting to walk through, and they still have all of the, or a lot of the like wall decorations stayed true, because usually those would get painted over, but since nobody lived there for several hundred years, they were just still there on the walls, and they were restored. It was very cool.
Lots to do with like mythology, so there were Hercules trials.
So for day 2 of our weekend, we decided to go to Derby. We walked along the river.
We went to a park.
Yeah, there was a nice park and a bird sanctuary where we heard a lot of birds.
But didn't actually see them. It was a lot of ground birds, so they were probably hidden in the brush.
Right. Then we walked back to the city center and we went to the Museum of Making, which is pretty cool. It covered a lot of different industrial fabrication in Derby.
And it's also just interesting to hear the stories of different creators.
But like Rolls-Royce engines and things like that, all from Derbyshire. So that was pretty cool. Then we went to Derby Cathedral, which was split into 3 sections. The tower is medieval. The main body of the church from the 1700s. And then the choir at the back was redone just about 40 years ago. So basically brand new.
But very pretty, which is the reason we go into things like cathedrals.
Yeah.